The People's Republic of China represent an absolute existential threat to our country. And whether the virus that savaged the world came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology or not, the Communist Party of China's allowance of international travel from that city, while permitting almost no internal travel from that source, is an absolutely unpardonable act.
So, good on you, left-wing Aussies and your Labour Green Party and your woke university infiltration. You won. You must be so proud of where you've brought our great country. Hi everyone and welcome to episode 54 of The Other Side. I'm Damien Curry. Today's going to be one of those episodes where I let others do most of the talking and we take a look at some of the best commentary that's happening in the classical liberal and conservative circles at the moment. That first opener clip there comes from a speech that President Trump's former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave to the Ronald Reagan Foundation. I think it's going to go down as one of the most important speeches of the year, I think, not just for conservatives and others on the non-left side of politics, but actually for everyone. Much more of that later. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We started the show to bring some balance to the Aussie political media conversation, since so much of what we see in our mainstream media these days tends to be filtered through a bit of a left-wing critical theory lens. There is another way of viewing the world. America's got a strong right-wing discourse in its politics. The UK does. We desperately need the same in Australia. Sensible, centre-right, and sensible right-wing conservative thinking and discussion and debate has to come into the picture in Australia because it just isn't there, especially at the ABC. So we desperately need it. That's why I started the podcast, and I really, really hope you join us and you enjoy it, even if your politics don't completely line up. Certainly no one's going to agree with everything that I say or everything that we put on this show. I don't agree with some of the stuff we put on this show, but it's about giving that content feeding that content into the public discourse because it's just not getting the attention and focus that it should. So please do share the show with your friends. Make sure you support us on social media. The best way to support us is actually, we don't need money. We do need money. I shouldn't say that, but we don't want to be asking our viewers directly for money. We want to look for sponsorship sources and things like that. But we're doing okay at the moment. We're all volunteers, but we just need you to click and like the specific things on any social media channel that you're on, especially with YouTube. If you click the bell, it actually helps in the algorithms as well. We're playing an algorithm game here with big tech, so we really appreciate your support in that way and in telling your friends about the show and reposting our stuff on social media. We really appreciate that. So thanks for your help. This is The Other Side. Now, last week in episode 52, I showed you what US commentator Michael Knowles had to say about our lockdowns here in Australia on his Daily Wire show in America. Well, now UK commentator Paul Joseph Watson has served up this to his global followers.
Guess who's criticising Australia for imposing one of the most brutal lockdowns in the developed world? Piers Corbyn? Amnesty International? Human rights campaigners? No. It's literally the communist Chinese government. The Global Times, the official mouthpiece for the CCP, published a scathing editorial describing Australia's decision to send members of the military to occupy Sydney and enforce lockdown as a move that seemed, quote, draconian among nations. Yeah, chances are if even Beijing is taken aback by your level of authoritarianism, that's a pretty draconian brand of authoritarianism.
And this is exactly what China does, folks. Good propaganda. But who can blame them? Especially when we are behaving like an authoritarian state. A democratic willing one, but nonetheless, we aren't a liberal democracy anymore.
Because just like communist China, Australia is now officially a biosecurity police state. How else could you describe a country where protest is outlawed? Where under a newly proposed law, those who risk arrest by even daring to attend a demonstration are subject to onerous fines of up to $5,500. Where those who merely post anti-lockdown information online could face fines of up to $11,000, where protest organisers face fines of $20,000, where pregnant women who promote such protests on Facebook are arrested in front of their kids in their own homes. How else could you describe a country where people face $500 fines for failing to wear a face mask outside, where surveillance drones are deployed to catch the unmasked?
They're the eyes and voices in the sky.
Social distancing is critical.
Yep, it's kind of creepy when you put it together like that. That is Paul Joseph Watson on the Locals platform. The link is in our program notes. A former uni classmate wrote to me on Facebook this week saying, how are lockdowns and mandated masks different to being allowed and not allowed to drive through red lights, drive on the right-hand side of the road, not drive in the breakdown lane of the highway, etc.? We seem to be constantly told to stop and go through the entirety of our lives. Seriously, how is it different to road rules? We make accommodations to individual liberty. We curb our individual liberties in a society for the wider public good. And how much we do that depends on where you sit on that political spectrum between authoritarianism and libertarianism. Now, we tend to make those decisions, we should be making those decisions based on what's proportionate and sensible for the situation. And we should do it only when it's absolutely necessary. And then we should do it with extreme care and the maximum possible respect we could have for civil liberties. We should talk a lot about liberties and privacy. But when's the last time you heard a politician or a CHO consider even your liberties or your privacy, or talk about that and how they've put that into their decision making around lockdowns? What Labor has done in this pandemic is run roughshod over civil liberties with massive fines and police state level enforcement of things that should be recommendations to adults, not orders to children. If presented as recommendations respectfully, there'd be a lot more public trust and willingness to comply if they didn't have this heavy policing and fines, and they wouldn't even need the heavy policing and fines. We didn't even get a chance. Dan Andrews, Anastasia Palaszczuk, Mark McGowan, it was the Labor premiers first of all, they all jumped on big fines and heavy policing right from day one with their lockdowns. Instead of trying to seek public trust and get us all on board and recommend and treat us like adults and respect and pay respect in what they said to our civil liberties and to our rights as liberal democratic citizens. So now we're not liberal democratic citizens. We are, by political definition, we are living now in an authoritarian democracy, an authoritarian democratic state that is run by police operating on political orders. Okay, we have shifted to a dominant left-wing command and control culture over the past 20 years. I don't think this is anything new. I went away overseas for 20 years. I came back. Australia had shifted. A lot of expats felt the same way, feel the same way. Australia's become much more nanny state, much more command and control. And the culture is such that we now expect government to take care of us like children. And we seem to have diminished the value of personal responsibility in our culture. Thanks, lefties. This be afraid and we'll take care of you approach has played exceptionally well at the polls in those Queensland and Western Australia state elections. So much so that the Liberal Party, the very party that should be speaking about liberty and standing up for liberty, and the National Party have abandoned their core liberal values and simply followed suit. So good on you left-wing Aussies and your Labor Green Party and your woke university infiltration. You won. You must be so proud of where you've brought our great country. And I'm sure China is absolutely thrilled at the extent of the compliance and the complete lack of pushback they're seeing from the population. Now, you usually need to sell around 5,000 to 10,000 books every week to be a bestseller in America. Mark Levin, the constitutional legal expert and talk radio commentator in the US, has a new book out called American Marxism. It's sold almost 600,000 copies in its first 2 weeks, catapulting it to the top of the New York Times bestseller lists. Levin has tapped into a deep current of concern in the United States and the Western world about the rise of Marxist thinking in our schools, our universities, and our media. He appeared on Sean Hannity's show on the Fox News network this week to explain exactly why a book like this has had such phenomenal, fast success. And this clip, for reasons you'll see in a moment, went viral.
I was part of the Reagan Revolution. I was part of the Tea Party movement. I was part of the Trump Revolution. There is a massive movement afoot. It's not under the radar. People just aren't looking at it. The silent majority is not going to be silent anymore. The American people are furious with what's happening to their country. And by American people, I mean all American people who love this country, regardless of their color, their religion, their background. Red-blooded Americans. They are sick and tired of what they've seen in the first 6 months of this administration. They don't like the way they're being treated by the elites in the media. They don't like being looked down upon by these phony professors who they bring on TV who trash them. They are disgusted with the teachers' unions. Parents all over this country can't believe what's happened to elementary schools and secondary schools. Parents go broke to send their kids to college, and now they're coming home on Thanksgiving or other days, and they don't know what's happened to them. We are paying for our own demise with tenured Marxist professors and administrators for schools that are turning on our founding and our history. Americans love their history. Americans love their history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Americans are sent all over the world to fight wars for people who do not look like them. America's borders are wide open. We have a president of the United States who is violating our immigration laws, who signs executive orders like he's Benito Mussolini. We're sick and tired of hearing from San Francisco Nancy Pelosi and New York City Chuck Schumer what they intend to do to our court system. Those courts belong to us, attacking separation of powers and our constitutional construct. We're tired of the way the family is trashed in this country, the family. We're tired of the way private property rights are treated in this country. We're tired of a lot of things going on in this country. Now we, the people, we are peaceful. You won't find us running around with Molotov cocktails. You won't find us attacking cops. We defend the cops. You won't find us burning cities and so forth and so on. We're not mostly peaceful. We're 100% peaceful. But we are pissed off. And we have had enough. And we're done talking about it. The idea that a book like this sells 400,000 copies in 1 week and is well on the way to 500,000, I've been in these movements before. I saw what happened with liberty and tyranny in the Tea Party movement. We know our history. We are a great people, and we have people in this country who haven't contributed a damn thing to it, and not a damn thing to it, trying to tear it down and redistribute wealth. They sound like they're soapbox Marxists going on and on about we don't provide this, we don't provide that, and Bernie Sanders is going to provide it, and AOC is going to provide it. They don't know a damn thing about this country. They use the benefits of capitalism to attack capitalism. They use liberty to attack liberty. They use the Constitution to attack the Constitution. I've been around a long time, and I'll be damned if I'm going to sit still for this. And they don't understand the American people. The American people are not going to roll over and play dead. The American people are going to speak out. And let me tell you what's going to happen in 2022 with the Manchin types and the others who pretend to be moderates, who play footsies with these American Marxists. You're going to get blown out. In fact, every damn one of you is going to get blown out. So kiss your career goodbye. You may have power now. You may be trying to force your will on the American people now, but it will not last. That's what's going on in this country. I feel it and I know it. That's all I have to say.
Very powerful stuff there from Mark Levin, constitutional legal expert and radio and TV news commentator and author of the current New York Times bestseller, American Marxism, which has sold almost 600,000 copies in its first 2 weeks. Now there's a message for our conservative and liberal politicians. A very important speech from the last United States Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, this week. Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, the equivalent to Australia's Foreign Affairs Minister to President Trump. He was speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation as part of its Time for Choosing speaker series, described as a new forum for leading voices to address critical questions facing the future of America's Republican Party.
True conservatives in America declined after the Reagan presidency. The administration of which I was a part brought grit, we brought populism, and a disruptive innovation to revive conservative principles. I'm proud to have helped President Trump destroy ISIS and its leadership. In doing so, we fulfilled my highest calling as the Secretary of State. I made sure our young men and women would be placed in harm's way with less intensity and with less frequency, and I am confident that we saved innumerable lives, American and other, and ended undurable suffering.
Mike Pompeo went on to discuss the importance of the ability to see what is right in front of us, that we view the world as it really is. And yes, that noise is a helicopter flying overhead, probably a police one. Pompeo says we've got to view the world as it really is, not as we wish it to be. And that's the problem with the approach of a lot of the left and the people in the State Department and in the Australian Foreign Affairs Department. He says that narratives that reflect ideology, like the left's critical race and gender theory, have suddenly become treated like fact by far, far too many people.
Presuppositions distort what we see to the extent that two observers of the very same facts may differ in every detail of what they recall. This happens to Susan and me all the time. Indeed, Congress resembles a carnival funhouse in some ways, for it's so partisan. The mirrors distort, they compress, they enlarge critical issues that could otherwise be resolved if only they could be observed as they truly are. This was something I'm proud that we did in how we secured freedom for America. We saw the world for what it really was, not as we wished it to be. Narratives have replaced reality. Deprecating fictions concerning the establishment of our nation are presented as facts. Rather than seek truth, which is hard work, those who seek power demand subservience to stories propagated by disingenuous elites and spewed by unscrupulous politicians enabled by the internet and by social media. I see it every day. The result is a nation separated from truth, but bound by narratives that superficially support the dispossessed. But these narratives actually enrich America's new ruling class. The woke billionaire, the star, the politician, who believe they're entitled to control the lives of others, though they often have trouble controlling their very own. This Politburo of false virtues believes they are smarter than everyone else. But frankly, in their arrogance, this wealthy and privileged group portrays itself to be truly destitute. For no government, no elite, and no authority has ever created prosperity and happiness by making itself lord over men and women who are all born to be free. President Reagan knew this.
That's Mike Pompeo, the former US Secretary of State. He then outlined the challenges that face America moving forward, and many of those are similar to the cultural challenges that are facing us in Australia today.
Collapse from within is possible. Race and open borders have become levers for the left to sow societal disunity. Immigration without assimilation, illicit drugs, human trafficking, disputed elections, inflationary risk, they've become the tools to disassemble our republic in what must surely be an attempt at national suicide. We allow MS-13 assassins to pass through our borders with gang tattoos covering their faces while we are lectured by our media for our obstinacy. There's a Marxist theoretician. I don't often talk about Marxist theoreticians. His name was Antonio Gramsci. He's an important man in history. He considered freedom servitude. He endeavored to rescue communism by positing that Western values are themselves cultural hegemony. Sound familiar? Western values have brought democratic institutions, technology, and a vast array of achievements to the world. We know this. And while Gramsci died years ago, I have to ask, why are children being taught his lessons that derive from his invalidation notions in our schools as we sit here today? The histories of our heroes should instead be taught. Men like President Reagan. We must do this so students may comprehend the potential for excellence that exists within every single person. There was a fellow, his name was Dr. Norman Borlaug. I had the privilege to speak in Iowa at an event there celebrating his life. He was born in 1914. He created the Green Revolution. It was President Carter who wrote that Dr. Borlaug did more than any individual in history in the battle to end world hunger. Borlaug invented the high-yield wheat and agriculture practice that are used in Kansas today, and the practices that averted starvation in places like Mexico and India, Pakistan, China, and all throughout Africa. In destitute villages the world over, Norman Borlaug didn't see race, he didn't see religion or color. He asked a simple question: do these people have enough food? In so doing, he saved more lives than any person in history. He received the Nobel Peace Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, and countless accolades all across the world. But today, there is scary mention of Mr. Borlaug in any of our public schools. This is tragic, and this must change. We dwell on our faults as if they were unique and not ubiquitous to every land that's ever existed. Our country is tearing itself apart. And for what? Anarchy and the elimination of our police can bring but death and fear. Discrimination can't be fought with more discrimination. And the form of socialism that is now being praised by the woke politicians and our billionaires will bring democracy to its knees. It'll bring it to its knees by culling dissenting opinions while concealing harmful biases in search engines and in social media platforms. And if we do not act to secure our elections by demanding voter ID and online manipulation, we will be governed by forces that are beyond our control. Now, I'm sufficiently cynical to always ask the question, who benefits? Well, it's not America, but an array of global interests that has amassed power and unaccountable wealth through their usurpation of the American dream. This was done by selling or commoditizing the engines of our economy. We had whole industries that moved to China.
Mike Pompeo went on to point out that China's fusion of business and government has become the model for monopolistic corporations that seek permanent market dominance. He says the hallmarks of this are things like continuous surveillance and uniformity and indoctrination, which has served the interests, he says, and led to the powerful rise and growth of some of the most powerful companies in history.
This is the reason why the same entities that exploit slave labor in China, lecture us at home about racism, continue to build their empires. They do it on the backs of slave labor. Do these leaders not hear the cries of Uyghur mothers whose babies are torn from their wombs? You won't read much about it in our press. If our press were indeed fair-minded, it would expose this deceit. But they're owned, and they're bought, and they are silent. When dominant social media platforms can suspend and then ban a president of the United States, there is too much power in too few hands. So how does our party respond? How do we meet this challenge? To change the present course, we must inform our citizens of the threats to liberty, designed to be subtle or unseen, and we must eliminate the constellation of laws and regulations that has granted these corporations almost unlimited and certainly unearned power and wealth.
Finally, Mr. Pompeo turned the spotlight squarely on China.
The People's Republic of China represent an absolute existential threat to our country. And whether the virus that savaged the world came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology or not, the Communist Party of China's allowance of international travel from that city, while permitting almost no internal travel from that source, is an absolutely unpardonable act. Our party must lead the way in demanding concrete answers concerning the origin of the virus that has caused such immense suffering and death. China nearly possesses the combination of wealth, strength, and population required to unseat the United States as the most powerful nation on earth. For an awfully long time, we counted on our military and other forms of power to maintain our preeminence. But these attributes are now in question. The Chinese Navy has ascended. China has stolen $1 trillion in technology from the United States. The extent of this theft has enabled dramatic increases in the lethality of their arms. And so while we still hold an edge across all of our services, we must fundamentally improve our military procurement system and our means of technical education here in our schools at home, or our superiority may well vanish. I've seen this up close running that enormous bureaucracy we call our State Department. Waste, politics, irresolution, they have no place inside of these bureaucracies. These institutions are bloated, they're unwieldy. I was accused of not protecting jobs at the State Department, and I was only saddened that I didn't get rid of more. I was operating in an environment that was unionized. I operated in an environment that was blatantly woke and dominated by the left. These bureaucracies must be brought to heel because they must serve. And to be strong, we must never politicize or indoctrinate our military. We can't permit this to happen. We must enhance our alliances all across the world. We worked so hard to build coalitions that defeated ISIS and a big group called the Quad to push back on China. We did this alongside friends like Australia and Japan and India. You know, even before COVID, our media, our popular culture, our universities, and our international businesses had been forces for democratic development and market creation throughout the globe. But I must say this is no longer universally true. Today, China has infiltrated Hollywood and academia, our technology companies, and the conglomerates that control America's media publishing. Our strength, freedom, has been turned against us. Communist influence must be eliminated in our country, root and branch. This is something President Reagan knew. We began this work. It's why I shuttered something called Confucius Institutes that were at our universities, designating them as foreign missions. It's why I closed this crazy thing that the Chinese called the consulate in Houston, which was actually a den of spies. We must be fearless. We must be fearless, and our party must lead this. We must be fearless in imposing proportionate costs on Beijing. Strength is what China understands. And today we're showing little of it. You know, China constructed its first overseas base in a place called Djibouti not too long ago. From that nation's location near southern approach to the Suez Canal, the Chinese Navy can affect our trade. Coupled with other regional redoubts, China, for the first time in history, is positioning itself as a global military power. And most crucially, China is empowering Iran, having inaugurated a multi-decade strategic partnership.
And that's former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation as part of its Time for Choosing speaker series. And you can watch the whole hour-long address on YouTube at the link in our program notes. Brilliant Aussie comedian Jimmy Rees is back this week online with his latest instalment of COVID lockdown comedy to keep us all sane. It's called A Letter from Sydney.
Dear Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, Victoria, all of you, just the rest of Australia, all of you. F*** you. Especially you, Victoria, with your stupid smug face. As much as we would love to visit the big things in Queensland, drink some wanker coffee in Victoria, see the poop machine and the wall of vaginas in Tasmania, and visit the things in WA. It's very far away, you know, it's very far away. We don't want to see your stupid pictures on Instagram right now. Oh, look, the schools are open. Here's a picture of me consuming vertically in a pub. Because for the next little while, we'll be making friends with our walls and homeschooling and tuning in every day to the Berejiklian press conference. And let me tell you, they are a punish.
And that's Jimmy Rees. There's a link to his channel on YouTube in our program notes. If you're not following Jimmy, you're not staying sane. And that's it for another episode of The Other Side. I'm Damien Curry. We'll catch you again in a few days. Make sure to like, click, subscribe, tell your friends and all that stuff. And please remember to send us an email at theothersideost@gmail.com. It's on the screen, theothersideost, all one word, @gmail.com. Simply asking to be added to our VIP WhatsApp group, and I'll send you the link to opt into that. It's not a chat group, just a broadcast group, only one way. We just send out the link to each episode for you. You get about 2 or 3 messages a week, and you won't miss anything on the show then. You can also subscribe to Discernible, our platform at discernible.io, to catch all of our other great content like The People's Project. So please do that, discernible with an a.io, unusual suffix, but that's it, discernible.io. Sign up, join the Discernible crew, and you can be regularly kept informed of all the programming. And if big tech ever do shut us down, you know where to go for the unedited content. So we'll see you in a few days for episode 55 of The Other Side.